So Ali, when we apply this policy, we can apply it on a given site or a range of sites, right? So is it fair enough to say that when you're designing your network, take some time and make sure we group the site ranges, that way we can apply the same policy across hundreds of sites?
Absolutely. I think coming from this SD-WAN model, one of the key things is to plan out for purposes of standardization. You don't want to have lots of different route maps and different policies all over the place. So planning for the site constructs, the objects, is essential. So when we think about the policy framework, at each step, we're thinking about planning. What are the objects that I care about? Everything requires planning. The site breakdown. How do I define my sites? What is the topology required for the sites? What's common? What's different? All that planning is tied into this. To be able to create a meaningful policy for your environment without a significant amount of planning going into it is going to be nearly impossible. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from this build-out, is that you need to know exactly what your plan is, how your network is going to look like, whether it's transition or end state, to be able to give meaningful results for your environment.
And one more question. So we talked about different types of policies, right? The traffic topology, which is a control policy, and traffic rules, which is data or app-aware policy. When you have multiple policies configured and applied on the same site or a same site range, which one takes precedence?
So the way that works out is, if we look at that framework, a control policy that manipulates your topology, this is fundamental. This is going into the OMP environment. This tells the controller what TLOCs are even allowed, what routes are even allowed. This is paramount. The next one is VPN membership. Again, both of these go into effect on the vSmart. This means they supersede everything. They are fundamentally important in terms of what the routing environment will look like. The next ones, from an order of operation, if you view the detailed presentation on how packet flow works and how the packet will go through, what you will find is, as a packet comes in, it is first subject to the app-aware policy, then the data policy, also referred to as traffic data rules, before it is sent by the vEdge into the wide area network.
And what happens if you, let's say, match an app-aware policy? Let's say you've got a SIP packet that matches a policy in app-aware that says we should prefer an MPLS link. And will we just go ahead and exit out of the logic now and follow that MPLS link? Or will we be also subjected to the subsequent policy, which is a data policy, which might steer things towards the internet?
So as you see here, this is an order of operations layout. That is, once you pass through app-aware, you will be forced to pass through the data policy as well. The point of this framework is, this is to do any dynamic learning based on link quality and things of that sort. However, the data policy constructs are strictly defined parameters. That is, you as an administrator have enforced a certain type of behavior, regardless of the quality of the link or anything else that might be happening. These are strict user-driven parameters.
So you really want to use those judiciously, right?
Exactly.
You want to be very...
So a lot of the times, this would be where you would have things like accept denies, strict policers, QoS definitions. Those would get defined in places like this. Whereas this one, this is more dynamic and SLA-based. So this is where you're defining the SLA, but the SLA can vary on different links. The link quality might periodically degrade. So you want dynamically to reroute traffic, but if you have strictly defined as a user certain behavior, you want that to be enforced, no matter what the quality of the link is.
So could a data policy also, have you exit the overlay at that point to a direct internet access?
Absolutely. This would be where you could define various kinds of behaviors, that is, including but not limited to QoS, DIA, change the next hop, remark traffic. There's a number of things as a user that you could do here. If you had to think about it in classical terms, it'd be similar to what you do with ACLs. So in a centralized fashion, you as a user can define a strict rule set on what to do. Whereas here, this is simply drawing on various SLAs that you define for your application.
OK, I got it. Thanks.
So, Sally, quick question. What parallels can you derive from the data policies versus the app-aware policies? Is there any similarities?
So the similarity is the fact that they both exist in data plane. All right, so you're not manipulating routing. You're not manipulating the actual tunnels being built themselves. What you are manipulating is what happens to the applications as they enter the data plane. So what that means is, for specific types of applications, I may want them to be subject to certain SLAs and to go on preferred paths. But I may choose to override that or not. And I may choose to do remarking, redirect traffic to a different exit point. As a user, as an administrator, I may want specific behavior for applications. It is uncommon to find policies written where these two conflict, because you want to use them in conjunction to get the most optimal experience. That is, for certain type of traffic, like voice, I want an SLA, and I want it to go on the best available path and potentially prefer a certain type of transport. But I also may want it to be subject to QoS, go into the low latency queue. I may also want to remark all of that traffic to DSCP46, which maps to EF. So you will want to work this in conjunction to get the best experience possible for your application.
Because we can quantify via the BFD's jitters, packet loss, and latency, and based on Appleware policies, we can drive those links that way.
That's right. The SLA enforcement happens based on the data collected from the BFD probes that are sent in data plane. So the premise of this framework is to leverage things that are being dynamically learned and provide optimal experience in conjunction with strict behavior that you want to always have enforced. So no matter what the quality of the transport is and how traffic is being rerouted, voice should always go in the low latency queue and should always be marked with EF classification. So this is why, as a framework, you define the SLAs, you define the parameters by which dynamically certain things can happen, but you also define strictly what will always happen. And that's where Appleware defines the dynamic aspect, data policy defines the strict aspect. You as an administrator want this enforced at all times. And that covers construction of policies. Any questions, guys?
Very nice.
So Ali, at any given point, we can activate only one of these policies, right? Now in production, what's the best practice if I need to modify the policy?
That's right. So as you can see from this activated section, at one given time, only one policy can be activated. The best practice around making changes to policies is when the policy that's in production is the one that you want to change. The thing that you'll ideally do is make a clone of that using the copy function. As a result, what you have is a copy of the production policy created that is not in effect, that allows you to go in, edit, make the changes that you want, and then when you're ready, when your change control has been approved, you can go ahead and activate that. In case of the need to roll back, you still have your original production policy in place, and you can quickly deactivate the new one that you put in place and activate the previous one. So when you click copy, it will allow you to create a clone of the production policy. So I could specify here, production policy version 2. In this fashion, you can maintain versioning. You can add in descriptions in terms of what changes were planned. This way you have good practices around updating the centralized policies that govern your entire network.
So when I want to activate the version 2, I don't need to deactivate version 1, right? I can just
That's
directly
correct.
go and
Once you're ready to activate something new, so as an example here, this environment is currently active. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to activate this. Instead of having to go to the menu and click deactivate here, I can go straight to the new policy that I wish to activate and leverage the activate option. So this reduces that step. Any questions, guys?
No, that was a good session.
Super session.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So in this session, Ali did a great job walking through the workflow on how to create centralized vSmart policies. Step by step, using the wizard, we can see that there's a standardized process for building policies, whether it be control policies, data policies, Appleware routing policies. It's all the same workflow and the same process. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.